and welcome to AGK's Vinyl Life. I'm your host, Anthony K. And on this week's episode, I'm doing an episode that I've wanted to do for 6 to 8 months. It's been on my bucket list of episodes that I definitely wanted to do for my channel. And so I'm getting around to doing that episode today. And it is my top 30 bands of all time. I got my pad of paper out earlier this afternoon and enjoyed the beautiful weather outside and sat on the deck and opened my Discogs and just went from A to Z, pulling out names that jumped out at me that I knew in my gut feeling were, favorite artists of mine. So I decided to go with my top 30 artists, and I'll show you an album from each of those artists very quickly. When I went through the process of ranking these 30, I did it partially by how many albums I own by these artists, how complete a collection I have by these artists, how much of these artists' albums for me are like 10 out of 10s, and how many are like throwaways. There was a logical train of thinking going on today, as I said on my patio, to try to get this into an actual ranked list. And I you know me, I don't do rankings often, so it was an agonizing couple of hours just listening to tunes on the deck and ranking them. But I'm happy with the final result. Let's get on with it. And like I said, I have ranked these, so let's just do it. I picked an album for each of these artists, and like I said, these are bands. So they are bands. They are rock bands. They are new wave bands. They are punk bands, ska bands. They're all bands, full bands. So there's no solo artists in here, but there are two that are maybe borderline. But all these other ones are bands. The other thing that really determined these top 30 is longevity. Most of these bands are bands that have been around since I was a kid, and I still listen to this day. They have survived the test of time. So let's do it. Number 30 for me is The Ventures. That's right, The Ventures, surf rock, instrumental Ventures, the Ventures King with over 200 albums in their library. The Ventures, I currently have 25 of their albums in my library. The Ventures, and this is a German press of The Ventures More Golden Greats. This was a German-only release, German-only release of More Golden Greats. With things like A Taste of Honey, House of Rising Sun, Classical Gas, Theme from Summer Place, and many more. It's a double LP. It's a 2 LP set. The Ventures coming in at number 30 for me. I love The Ventures, always will. They were one of the bands that inspired me to learn how to play guitar. The Ventures, More Golden Greats, and The Ventures coming in at number 30 in my top 30 favorite bands of all time. In at number 29, and I have 23 albums 23 pieces by this artist in my collection, and they are Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull coming at 23. Years ago, I might have placed them higher, but I don't listen to Tull that much anymore. I occasionally get a hankering to listen to Jethro Tull, and when I do, it's most likely this album right here, Benefit. And this is the very rare record store day pressing of Jethro Tull's Benefit, mixed by Steven Wilson. It's the 2013 Steven Wilson remix, and it was only limited to 3,000 copies, and this Steven Wilson remix has never been released outside of Record Store Day, and it sounds fantastic mix. Benefit, one of my top 3 favorite Jethro Tull albums of all time. Jethro Tull's Benefit, and they are in at number 29. In at number 28 is a band that originally today I had them placed much higher, but I kept having kind of bump them around. They moved all over my list today, but I finally settled down at 28, though tomorrow I could wake up and say they're number 21 or 22, which they actually were higher. They were in the top 20, then they were around 21, 22, but they did get bumped down to 28. And that's mostly because I love some of their albums, but some of their material loses me. But I certainly love this band, and they are still around to this day and releasing albums to this day. I love them. They are The Alarm, and I absolutely love The Alarm. And this is a very rare album called Standards, which was released, I think, around, this is, you don't see vinyl released from this era. This is a 1990 compilation. This one, you don't see it around. It was very rare. It was, of course, towards the end of vinyl pressings. And this is Standards. It's a comp that featured everything they had done up till 1990. But like I said, they've continued right into the 90s and 2000s and 2010s. But this is a really strong comp with, 14 songs, 14 of their best tracks, if you can find it. The Alarm, Standards. And The Alarm coming in at number 28, my top 30 bands of all time. Number 27 is an artist that needs no introduction. Really, another band that could have placed higher, but I'm not a big fan of this band. I don't like their first couple albums, even though I do have Time and a Word. I don't care for it. I don't care for Topographic Oceans at all. I don't care. Some of the stuff that was in the 90s, I don't care for, and I certainly don't care for their later works, their 2000s works too much, and 2010s works too much. They were a band that's hit and miss, and even their legendary albums that a lot of people like, I don't like every song on their albums. This was the album that introduced me to them. I'm talking about Yes, of course. And this was, I knew Yes before this album came out. Things like And You and I loved And You and I, Roundabout. But I never really had bought a Yes album until this one came out. And this is the album that got me into Yes. And it was Drama. That's right. Yes's Drama was the album. This is the first album I owned by Yes. This is a Canadian pressing, a first Canadian pressing. Drama, which of course had a new lineup, and a lot of fans didn't sort of bash this album when it came out because John Anderson wasn't here and so on and so forth. But I love this album. This is the album that got me into Yes. And then I, of course, would go backwards and forwards. I would continue forwards, definitely, following their catalog, and I would delve back in and buy some of their earlier works. But Drama was the one that just turned my crank. It was the one that finally convinced me to get into Yes. It was Machine Messiah and Tempest Fugit that just blew my mind and got me into Yes. Though I did like, and then later I discovered Relayer, which is probably my second favorite album, and Close to the Edge, and so on and so forth. But Yes, Drama got me into them, and they came in at number 27 in my top 30 artists of all time. Not artists, groups of all time, bands of all time. Next up in at number 26, and people are probably saying, "Oh, I'm surprised, Anthony. I thought you would have rated them higher, especially when they're from your hometown." But honestly, you know, I enjoy their stuff, but there's a lot of their later albums I don't like. I do like their 70s stuff and their early 80s stuff, but their late 80s stuff I don't like. Their 90s stuff was hit and miss. Their 2000 stuff for me was not very good at all. So it just didn't capture me. And I found that the lead singer, Geddy Lee, I think we know who we're talking about, his voice has not stood the test of time with me. I find the early albums, even though it was 2112, it was one of my all-time favorite albums, I just find that the early screeching Geddy, maybe my old ears are not liking Geddy as much as they used to when I was a kid. So Rush is kind of worn off on me. I prefer that now, the Moving Pictures Signals era of Rush, Hemispheres, when his voice wasn't quite so screaming. So Rush coming in at number 26 for me, and this is one you never see. This is Moving Pictures live in 2011, which I found at a flea market, believe it or not. Found this at a flea, no, I'm not, at a, was it a flea market? It was out of town at a flea market or an antique store or something. I'd never seen this before. And it's the complete Moving Pictures album, which of course just had its, was it 50th anniversary, 40th anniversary just came out of the Moving Pictures album. And this is the entire Moving Pictures album performed live. So it's kind of cool to have in the collection, one you don't see often. Rush's Moving Pictures live, the entire album in its entirety, in its original tracking order, performed live, and it sounds very close to the original album, just live. But Moving Pictures, one of my favorite albums by Rush. And Rush coming in at number 26. Group number 25 on my top 30 is a band that needs no introduction. I love this band, a band that unfortunately probably could have gone longer if of course the singer Freddie Mercury hadn't passed away. And I'm talking about Queen, and I love Queen. And yes, they beat Rush, and yes, and all these other bands. I love Queen. So coming in at number 25, and by the way, just to mention the Alarm, I have 12 albums from the Alarm in my collection. Jethro Tull, I have 23 albums from in my collection. Yes, I have 24 albums or pieces from in my collection. I have 24. Rush, I have 16 pieces in my collection of Rush. And Queen, I have 14 pieces in my collection from Queen. And this is Queen's Live Killers, first Canadian pressing, Queen Live Killers. This is one of my favorite live albums by anybody of all time. I put this in maybe my top 20 or maybe even top 10 live albums of all time. I love this album. This is just such a spectacular performance of Queen live. And this came out, I believe, in 1980, 1979. So it featured everything up to the jazz album. I don't think it included the game. I think it was just before the game, yes. Just before the game. It included jazz and News for the World and Day at the Races and Night at the Opera and all of the early stuff. This is just a spectacular performance. You can hear how Freddie Mercury just absolutely is in touch and controls his audience. Queen Live Killers, 2 LP set. This is original, first Canadian pressing. Like I said, one of my top 20, if not top 10 live albums ever made. And Queen in at 25. My 24th favorite band of all time. And they used to be higher when I was a teenager, but they've moved down as time goes on and my musical library has expanded. But there was a time when they were very high on my list. They could have even been in my top 10 at one time. But now they're settling in at number 24, and I'm talking about The Who, in at number 24. And from The Who, I have 21 pieces in my collection by The Who. And this is the Record Store Day release from a couple of years ago. I think 2018 Record Store Day release of their classic Kids Are All Right, which was a documentary movie that I remember going to see that movie at the theater a few times with my friends. It was one of those movies that played on the Friday night repertory theater where they all played cult films and whatnot. And I remember seeing the Who's Kids Are All Right a couple times at that theater and enjoying it on the big screen. Such a great movie, and that just goes through their entire career. And this is, of course, the soundtrack to that movie, Who's Kids Are All Right, a double LP, and it, of course, includes a big book. And this was on a couple of different colors of vinyl. I think this was on a red and a blue vinyl, if I remember right. A red and a blue vinyl, but I'm not going to pull it out because we're going to keep moving here. So this is the Kids Are All Right, The Who. And The Who coming in at number 24 on my top 30 bands of all time, with 21 pieces in my collection by The Who. Number 23 is another group that jostled up and down. They were going to be in my top 20, then they were down low. They finally settled in at number 23, and this is a band that this t-shirt might tell you who this band is. I'm talking about The Cure. And The Cure are coming in at number 23, and I have 13 pieces in my collection from The Cure. And for those of you that are wondering, this Cure t-shirt here, I just picked up about 3 months ago. 2 or 3 months ago, I picked up this Cure shirt, and this Cure shirt was actually designed by The Cure's Robert Smith himself. He actually designed this shirt, and I bought this shirt directly through the Cure website, as all the proceeds from the sale of this shirt went to a charity for cancer. So that's why I grabbed it, and it was designed by Robert Smith himself. Really cool Cure shirt. But yeah, The Cure are coming in at number 23. And I had to pick Disintegration. This is just a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. This is the Robert Smith remix, the more recent Robert Smith remix. It's a 2 LP set. This particular remix came out in 2010, and Robert Smith himself remastered this album. This is a masterpiece. Disintegration, an absolute masterpiece, with Plain Song, Pictures of You, Love Song, Lullaby, Fascination Street. It's just a perfect album. If you've never gotten into The Cure, I highly recommend this as your jumping off point. The Cure, Disintegration, an absolute masterpiece. Coming in next at number 22 in my top 30 bands of all time is another artist that jumped all around. I thought they would have made it into my top 20. I was really thinking they'd be in my top 20, even close to the top 10. But they jostled around and finally settled in at number 22, mainly because I love this band. This is a band that nobody ever talks about in the VC. They are under one name in UK, where they're from, and under another name here in North America, because their name conflicts with another band with the same name. They're known as The Mission UK here in North America, though their name is just The Mission. And I fell in love with this band in the late 80s, and I have followed them ever since. They continue to make music to this day. I would love to see them live sometime. But The Mission, and this is a very recent release. It just came out about maybe 2 months ago at the most, called The Mission Collected. It's part from the Collected series, put on by Music on Vinyl. This is one of the latest entries into the collected series, My Music on Vinyl. This is a limited edition of, how many were of this? 3,500 copies, and collected basically goes through the entire career of the Mission to date. It is a 3 LP set, the first 2 LPs being best of, going through their entire career, and then the last 2 sides, which is really great, are extended 12-inch mixes. So some of their greatest 12-inch mixes take up the last 2 sides. And if you've never listened to the if you've never listened to the Mission, got tongue-tied there, you don't know what you're missing. Check them out, the Mission. I love these guys, absolutely love these guys. I hope they'd make it higher, but they didn't. But 22, I'm quite happy placing them. I have 15 albums by the Mission in my collection again, and they're all albums. 15 albums in my collection by the Mission, and such fantastic songs on here. They did a fantastic version of Like a Hurricane. Neil Young and Crazy Horses, Like a Hurricane. Deliverance is a classic. Butterfly on a Wheel, Hands Across the Ocean, Like a Child Again. This is just a spectacular, spectacular band. Beyond the Pale. You need to check out the Mission. And this is, like I said, their very recent Music on Vinyl collected edition. The Mission coming in at number 22. In at number 21 of my all-time favorite bands of all time is one that people might go, well, he's a solo artist. Well, he is and he isn't. I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen, but it's Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. And unfortunately, Bruce, I don't know why, but Bruce, a lot of Bruce's albums just have Bruce Springsteen on the cover, though he's playing with the E Street Band. Some albums, it's Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band on the cover, but some albums it's just Bruce Springsteen on the cover, and even though the E Street Band is playing with him on that album. Now, not all of Bruce's work has been with the E Street Band. He has done solo albums. I'm not really talking about the solo albums. I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. That's why I allowed it to be in my favorite bands of all time, because the work I really like by Bruce is the stuff with the E Street Band. I'm not a big fan of his solo stuff, other than maybe the Human Touch and Lucky Town albums, but some of his other solo albums I'm not a big fan of. So Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band coming in at number 21, and this is Chapter and Verse, a really great 2 LP comp. If I were going to suggest something, this is a recent comp. I think this came out in 2016 or 17. 2016, this comp came out, and it spans through his career with picking out some bits and pieces, even some really early stuff before he was with, before he went as Bruce Springsteen or went with the E Street Band, when he was in the Castles, or when he was in Steel Mill, or when it was the Bruce Springsteen Band. So there's a real hodgepodge on here, but it does go through Born to Run and Darkness on the Edge of Town and The River and Born in the USA and Tunnel of Love, and it even includes, Human Touch and Lucky Town and The Rising, Wrecking Ball. It goes through all his career. A really great comp featuring a lot of stuff by the E Street Band on it. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band coming in at number 21 in my top 30 favorite bands of all time. Coming in at number 20, now we're into the top 20. Coming in at number 20 of my top bands of all time is another band that has had many marks. Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5. I think it's 5 marks or 6 marks. Not all the marks have been successful. The really early stuff, I don't really get into their really, really early, late 60s stuff. And some of their late 70s stuff, like Come Taste the Band, I didn't care for. Or some of their late 80s stuff I didn't care for, and early 90s stuff. And some of the 90s stuff I didn't care for at all. And even some bits and pieces of the 2000 stuff. But I love their 2010 stuff. I'm talking about Deep Purple. And the one I'm showing you today is Deep Purple's Fire in the Sky. This is a 3 LP comp. Fire in the Sky by Deep Purple. A 3 LP comp that came out a couple of years ago that goes through their entire library, I believe up to, not to Whoosh, the album before Whoosh, which is escaping me at the moment. But it does feature all the great tracks from everything right up, and it goes in reverse chronological order, which is interesting. So it starts with the newest stuff like Hell to Pay, from Now What, and Vincent Price from Now What. So this goes up to the Now What album. But then it goes backwards from there through the 90s and 80s stuff, finishing off with Hush. That's the last song on side 6. So it goes in reverse chronological order, but it's got all the classics on here. Hush, Kentucky Woman, Black Knight, Child in Time, Speed King, Strange Kind of Woman, Fireball, Smoke on the Water, Highway Star, Woman from Tokyo, Burn, Stormbringer, Perfect Strangers, Bad Attitude. It's got all the greats on here, and a really good set to have if you can find it. Deep Purple coming in number 20 for me in my top 30 favorite bands of all time. Deep Purple. Number 19 is a more recent band. They are a 2000s band and 2010s band. I know quite a few people actually in the vinyl community kind of bash this artist, this band, which is a shame. I love this band, absolutely love this band. Everything they do, I love. I'm talking about Coldplay. That's right, Coldplay. And they're in for number 19 for me. Coldplay are in at number 19, and this is the album. This is the album that really got me into Coldplay, though I was familiar with their work before this album. This album, X and Y, would be the album that really catapulted me into a lover of Coldplay. And this is a recent reissue, remaster from earlier 2010s of X and Y, and it would be the songs like Talk and Fix You that would really, really just capture me and make me a mega Coldplay fan. Coldplay, X and Y, fantastic album, and I am a completist with Coldplay. Coldplay, I currently have actually 19 items in my Coldplay collection. Deep Purple, I have 15 items in my Deep Purple collection. And Bruce Springsteen, I have 27 items in my Bruce Springsteen collection and 15 items in my Mission collection, just in case I didn't mention those ones. So yeah, 19 items in my Coldplay collection. And at number 18 is a band that needs no introduction. And there's going to be a couple bands that I'll be surprised in the comments when people say, Anthony, you didn't include this band or this band, and I'll say what those two bands are that I think people will be really shocked aren't even in my top 40 bands of all time. But in at number 18 in my top 20 bands of all time are the Rolling Stones. And the Rolling Stones, I have 24 items in my Rolling Stones collection, and this one I'm showing you here is a Record Store Day exclusive that only dropped in Canada. I've shown it on live streams. I don't know if I've ever shown it in an actual video before, but this particular album was a Record Store Day album from a couple of years ago, 2019 Record Store Day. And this album appeared only in these select record stores across Canada, which are all listed on here. There's record stores from all across Canada listed on here. And this album was only available in the record stores that are listed on this back cover. It was only released to these record stores. And only the first 50 people in line at any of these record stores received a copy of this album. So it's pretty rare, and they got it for free. And yes, it was a completely free album from the Rolling Stones for Record Store Day in Canada at select stores, completely free, given free when you walk through the door. It's early tracks, things like Around and Around, Confessing the Blues, Time Is on My Side, Susie Q, Not Fade Away, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, I'm a King Bee, Carol, Walking the Dog. It's All Over Now and more. And it's a completely analog recording produced by a company called Return to Analog. It's a completely analog production. All the songs taken from analog tapes, analog mastered, analog, everything analog, and completely free and kind of rare. So that's why I thought I'd show this Rolling Stones album. Rolling Stones in at number 18 on my top 30 favorite bands of all time. In at number 17, hedging out the Rolling Stones, and into number 17 are a band that I've loved since their first album. I'm talking about U2. U2, I fell in love with their first album, Boy, and didn't look back. I have bought everything by U2, own everything by U2, album-wise. My U2 library currently consists of 29 pieces in my U2 library. I love U2, and on today's show, for the one I'm showing you for today, this was their most their most recent album, Songs of Experience. Their most recent, and this was the deluxe box set, numbered box set, Songs of Experience, which was a 2 LP, and it was actually released on a blue vinyl, Songs of Experience. And a really great spin. This particular box set included a newspaper. That's something I haven't seen since Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. So it included a newspaper. It included a massive poster, big massive poster, download card, and of course the CD version of the album as well. This deluxe box set of Songs of Experience, the last studio release from YouTube. Hoping to see something new from YouTube in the near future. Songs of Experience by U2, and they are in at number 17 in my top 30 artists of all time. Top 30 bands of all time. Okay, we're the final pile here. We're into number 16 now. And number 16 is a band I've talked about many times on my channel. I've shown albums by them on my channel. They are a Canadian band. They are a prog band. They've drifted from prog to rock, back to prog. They're a fantastic band. Well over 20 albums in their collection of 23, 24. I can't remember off the top of my head. I have in my collection 26 items from these guys in my collection, most of them being vinyl albums. In fact, 95% of it is just vinyl albums. This band is an underrated band, probably the most underrated band on my entire list. I'm talking about Oakville, which is 15 minutes from me. Oakville's own Saga, and I've been talking, like I said, about Saga recently. And what I'm going to show you here are 3 albums real quickly. This one here, which is called Full Circle, House of Cards, and Marathon. And as you can see, there's a theme on each of these albums. And these are all the recent 2021, 2022 remasters. And all 3 of these albums have never been on vinyl before. This is the first time any of these 3 albums has been on vinyl. These albums came out between 1999 and 2003. These 3 albums, they were turn of the millennium albums. And the reason I decided to show you these 3 because they all came in. I got all 3 of these this year. Full Circle, once again, Full Circle, House of Cards, and Marathon, which concluded what's called the Chapters series of songs on their albums. Their early albums, Saga 1, Images of Twilight, Silent Night, Worlds Apart, their first 4 albums had songs that had chapters after them. The songs chapter so-and-so, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And they went up to, I think, chapter 6 or 7. Let's see what they pick up with here. They pick up with chapter 9 here. Yeah, chapter 9. So they went up to, I think, chapter 8 on those first 4 albums. And then they dropped that whole chapters thing for a number of albums. And then the chapters would return. And the idea being that you take all those separate songs on all those separate albums that said chapter 1, 2, 3. These finish, for example, on Full Circle, you have chapters 9, 13, and 10. On House of Cards, you have chapters 11 and 15. And last but not least, on Marathon, you have chapters 12, 14, and 16. And 16 concludes the chapter saga. And the idea was that if you took all those songs from those various albums and put them in order, those chapters in order, they would tell a story. They would complete a puzzle. So Saga, fantastic prog band. The vocalist is Michael Sadler. The vocalist is incredible. The Christian brothers, incredible musicians. I highly recommend Saga. They are an underrated band, and now's your chance to explore their library, because their entire library is being remastered in Germany and pressed to vinyl. And at least well over half of the library has never been on vinyl before. Has only been on CD. So I'm just loving getting these as they come out. So number 16 is Saga in my top 30 bands of all time. In at number 15, another band that needs no introduction. A lot of people are scrambling for the box set by these guys. It came out on Record Store Day. It didn't drop in Canada, and a lot of people are upset it didn't drop in Canada. But it is coming out on June 18th here in Canada, and I'm talking about the Ramones. And this album right here will be one of the albums that's in that box set that comes out on June 18th here in Canada. The Ramones' Pleasant Dreams. One of their, this was when they got into the 80s. I think this came out in 1980 or 81. I can't remember when this album came out. 1980 or 81. I can't see it on here. It was right at the turn of the 70s and 80s. The Ramones, Pleasant Dreams. This is an original first UK pressing that sounds fantastic. I love the Ramones. Everything they did, of course, I'll be getting that box set. Even though it includes this album, I will be getting that box set because there are a couple things in that box set that I don't have. So, Ramones, Pleasant Dream, original first UK pressing. And the Ramones coming in at number 15 of my top 30 favorite bands of all time. Number 14 are a UK band, and the hat should give it away. I'm talking about ELO, the Electric Light Orchestra, of course masterminded by Jeff Lynne. And the album I'm going to show you from them is the Electric Light Orchestra in The Night the Light Went On in Long Beach. And this is a very rare album. You don't see this album in North America. This is a UK press, if I remember right, or a German. This is a German press. Sorry, a German pressing. This album was never, I don't think it was ever dropped in North America. It was strictly dropped in Europe, UK and Europe and Germany. So this is, and it even says right on it, import album. This hype sticker that's been stuck on here, import, because it was not released in North America. And this is a really fantastic live performance early in Electric Light Orchestra's career. I believe this is around 1974, 75. 1974 this album came out. And included a lot of their really early stuff like Daybreaker, Showdown, Day Tripper, 538 Overture, Orange Blossom Special, and The Hall of the Mountain King, Great Balls of Fire, Roll Over Beethoven. It's a really, really spectacular live performance early in the Electric Light Orchestra's library. And like I said, this was only released in Europe. This is a German press to show you guys. The Electric Light Orchestra coming in at number 14 of my favorite bands of all time. In at number 13 is a band that we all know. I'm talking about Pink Floyd, and the album I'm showing you here is not really an album, because everybody's seen Dark Side of the Moon a million times, and Wish You Were Here, on the Wall, and Animals, and all these other, Pink, Momentary Lapse of Reason, Division Bell, Pulse, the new recently released Pulse on vinyl, so on and so forth. So I thought I'd show you something that you don't see everybody showing in the vinyl community for sure. Pink Floyd coming in at number 13, and I have 23 items of Pink Floyd in my vinyl in my library. ELO, I have 16 pieces. Ramones, I have 19 pieces, and Saga, I have 26 pieces. Just catching you guys up. But Pink Floyd, I've got 23 pieces, and what I'm showing you here is this is the original release of Pulse. That's right, the original release of Pulse when it first came out. Back in 1995, in this wonderful this wonderful jacket, and what I'm going to show you here though is it's a laser disc. That's right. I don't think I've ever shown a laser disc on my show before. It is a laser disc. That's right, a laser disc of the Pink Floyd Pulse tour. It's a laser disc, something completely different for you guys. A laser disc. You need a laser disc player to play that, which is, of course, laser discs were after VHS tapes and just before DVDs were, of course, laser discs. And it was 2 laser discs to the set, total of 4 sides. You would have to flip the sides over to watch the full show. But there you go, a laser disc version of Pink Floyd's Pulse, something a little different for my show. And like I said, Pink Floyd coming in at 13 in my top 30 bands of all time. In at number 12 for me is a band that When I was a teenager, they could have been number 1 or 2, or certainly tied for number 1. But they've gone down through the years. But they're still there, still a favorite. They're still a band that I won't turn a song off if I hear it playing, and I still do go to these guys whenever I can. Their 70s output is classic, and early 80s output is classic. Mid 80s they struggled, late 80s they were a disaster, 90s a disaster, 2000s a disaster. It wasn't until the mid 2010s that they would actually release some decent material, with the News album I think was the next great album, but there was a whole string of albums that they were just not good. But their 70s and 80s output was spectacular. And I'm talking about Nazareth, who I showed you just the other day. I was talking about Nazareth in my last video. So Nazareth's coming in at number 12. And as you can see, I was a big Nazareth guy, because I have, this is the highest so far on my list, with a total of 32 pieces of Nazareth in my collection right now. And this is the last album from 2014 that Dan McCafferty would appear on before he left the band, as he suffers from COPD. He just couldn't sing anymore without losing breath. So he left the band, and they now continue on without Dan. But this is the last effort with Dan McCafferty, and this was a good album. This was a great goodbye from Dan McCafferty. It's Rock and Roll Telephone by Nazareth from 2014. 2 LP set. Rock and Roll Telephone. And of course, at this point in the band, the only 2 original members were, of course, Dan McCafferty and bassist Pete Agnew, and Pete Agnew's son on drums. But Rock and Roll Telephone, a great goodbye from Dan McCafferty, a great spin. And Nazareth in at number 12 in my top 30 bands of all time. In at number 11, now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. In at number 11 is another fantastic band, a German band. I love these guys. They're heavy rock. They've been called heavy metal sometimes, and metal, but they're just a plain hard rockin' band. Their first album was more prog than anything that they ever released, but they've been around since the 70s, and they just released a stellar brand new album this year, which I showed you guys in my last video. I'm talking about the Scorpions, and of course Rock Believer, one of my top 3 albums of this year. And yeah, Scorpions in at number 11 of my top 30 bands of all time. With 25 pieces in my collection of Scorpions, and I decided to show you this one. Very, very rare album cover, and very, very rare album. This is a German press of this album. This is Best of Scorpions, with this really cool, sexy cover. And this covered the really early period of the Scorpions, their initial years up to Taken by Force, with the first an iteration of the band, and this goes up to Taken by Force, with all the classics on here, like Steam Rock Fever, Pictured Life, Robot Man, Speedy's Coming, He's a Man, She's a Woman, In Trance, The Sails of Charon, but this is the shorter version of Sails of Charon, and Virgin Killer. So the best of the really, really early Scorpions albums. Best of Scorpions, with this sexy cover. I thought this cover was cool. Just a sexy bum on there, and the Scorpion. I love that album. I love that cover. I don't know why. It's just sexy and hot. But yeah, Best of Scorpions coming in, and the Scorpions coming in at number 11. And now here we are. We're in the top 10 artists, album groups, top 10 bands. I won't get it right to the end of this video. I won't get it right. The top 10 bands of all time for me, AGK. In at number 10, a band that had a very, very short life. They only lasted for the early to about 1978, and then they were gone. The leader of the band, Bill Nelson, has gone on to create a massive body of work, and released an album actually in the 2010s called Bill Nelson and the Gentleman Riders. I've got it in my collection. I should have pulled that for today to show, but I didn't, where he revisits the music he did when he was with this band. I'm talking about Bebop Deluxe in at number 10th place for me, my 10th favorite band of all time. And even though I've got 9 pieces in my collection from Bebop Deluxe, they had a very small library of albums. Even though I've only got 9 pieces, these albums have stood the test of time. This band has stood the test of time. I do not get tired of listening to this band. I pull these guys out every once in a while. I loved Bebop Deluxe, and of course I had to show, this is one of my favorite album covers of all time. for sure. Sunburst finish with the sexy nude lady on the cover holding the flaming guitar. I just think it was a fantastic concept. They were on the Harvest label. This is a import version on the Harvest label. And then there they are in the tube. And then the ladies in the tube. And this is my favorite album by Bebop Deluxe. And could be one of my all-time favorite albums, period. If I were to pick, if I had to pick, 30 all-time favorite albums of all time, I think this would be my favorite 30 albums of all time. This Sunburst finish. This is a 10 out of 10 for me. Fair Exchange, Heavenly Homes, Ships in the Night, Crying to the Sky, Sleep That Burns, Beauty Secrets, Life in the Air Age, Like an Old Blue Song, Kristen Gazel, and Blazing Apostles. This album is a 10 out of 10. Highly recommend if you're ever going to listen to anything by Bebop Deluxe. This is the album right here. Bebop Deluxe, Sunburst finish. Bebop Deluxe, number 10 in my top 30 bands of all time. In at number 9. I just got that a little out of order. In at number 9 is another band that were short-lived. They rose up in the late 70s and were gone by the mid-80s. But their music, once again, also lives on for me. I never get tired of hearing their music. I only have 11 pieces from this band in my collection. And the band I'm talking about is The Clash. That's right, The Clash. They are in at number 9 in my top 30 bands of all time. I love The Clash. I never get tired of The Clash. And I decided to show you this live at Shea Stadium album instead of the usual London Calling, Sandinista, combat rock albums that everybody shows. I decided to show you this live at Shea Stadium, their legendary North America appearance. And I believe, if I remember right, this was before when they opened for The Who, the live at Shea Stadium appearance. And it's got all the classics: London Calling, Police on My Back, Guns of Brixton, Tommy Gun, Magnificent Seven, Armageddon Time, Rock the Casbah, Train in Vain, Career Opportunity, Spanish Bonds, Clamp Down, English Civil War, Should I Stay or Should I Go, I Fought the Law. So it does go right up to combat rock. This is a legendary freaking performance. Highly recommend, if you can find this album, to get it. If you're a Clash lover and a Clash completist, a nice live Clash. And Clash in at number 9. Coming in at number 8 of my top 30 bands of all time is Neil Young and Crazy Horse. People know I'm a big Neil Young fan, but this is another one of those artists where you could have gone, well, he's a solo artist. No, I'm not a big Neil Young solo fan. I have very few of Neil Young's solo albums, but all his work with Crazy Horse, I'm a completist. I love his work with Crazy Horse. So Neil Young and Crazy Horse, that band, that iteration of Neil Young, I love, and that's why I put him in at number 8 of my favorite bands of all time. Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and this is an album that you don't see. It's worth a pretty penny. It wasn't pressed very widely, and I'm talking about Psychedelic Pill. That's right, Psychedelic Pill. And this pressing came out, when did this pressing come out in? Does it say on here? 2012. And it's a 3 LP pressing in like a book style jacket. A 3 LP pressing in like a book style jacket. And the last side actually had an etching on it. We'll yank it out. Psychedelic Pill, I love this album. A great Neil Young work. And there's the etching. I don't know if you can catch it. I'll try to just move it around a little bit. That's the side 6 etching on side 6. Psychedelic Pill, out of print, hard to find, a classic, a great spin. Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Psychedelic Pill, and the band coming in at number 8 on my top 30 bands of all time. Coming in at number 7, a band that everybody knows I love this band, and I'm talking about, this is my favorite metal band of all time, Iron Maiden. And the release I'm showing you today is Iron Maiden, the original 40th anniversary edition of their debut album, which of course had Phantom of the Opera on here, Running Free, Transylvania, and of course their theme song, Iron Maiden. This is the 40th anniversary picture disc pressing of it, and it's actually a decent picture disc because it's actually, the picture's pressed on It doesn't interfere with the sound at all. It sounds great because the picture's not paper, it's film, and it's actually on a clear vinyl. So it actually sounds perfect. There's no loss in sound on this picture disc. It is a stellar, stellar pressing of their original first album. This is a 40th anniversary edition, which was not released on Record Store Day. There was a version of this released on Record Store Day. Why? But a year before this was released on Record Store Day, they released it. 40th anniversary. But yeah, Iron Maiden, for me, coming in at number 7 of my top 30 bands of all time. In at number 6, it's another band that I've talked about before. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. We're talking about Genesis, who I just saw their farewell tour, their last Domino tour, which was spectacular. Phil sounded great, no matter what you say. Some people said he didn't sound good. He sounded perfect. Check out my video I did of that concert. I did release a video of that concert. So in at number 6 of my favorite 30 bands of all time is Genesis. And this is the last Domino. Did I mean this? No. But this is, because I have everything that Genesis released, but I had to have it to be a completist. The last Domino 4 LP set, which actually has a lot of pictures from their current tour. A 4 LP set that spans a good portion of the Genesis career, and was actually basically the set list for the concert tour. So you got stuff here from most of the Genesis albums, though there are painfully a couple albums painfully missing from it, from this compilation, but still a great compilation to have. Genesis, the last Domino compilation that came out in November to coincide with their tour. And of course, Genesis, I have 37 pieces in my collection from. Iron Maiden, I have 23 pieces in my collection of Iron Maiden. Neil Young and Crazy Horse, I have 20 pieces in my collection from Neil Young and Crazy Horse. And now we're down to the top 5. Coming in at number 5th place are a Manchester band, if I'm not mistaken. I love these guys, absolutely love these guys. I've talked about them many, many times before. And they are New Order. New Order in at 5th place of my top 30 bands of all time. New Order. And I have 25 items in my New Order collection. And this is one I don't think I've ever shown. This is the Live at Manchester International Festival with a 12-piece synthesizer orchestra. This thing is great. I can't even pronounce the name of the album because it's just basically all these symbols at the bottom here. It's New Order and Liam Gillick. So It Goes, and then whatever this all means here. And this is a 3 LP in a box set. It's a limited edition performance. It's spectacular. Comes with a really beautiful, beautiful book that talks about it. And all 3 of the beautiful, beautiful book. Don't know if we can see it here. I'll just try to really quickly do this. Struggle to be good for time. Just do that. There we go. Whatever. And all of these were on a different color vinyl. I'll just show you one. This one's on a red. I don't remember what the other 2 colors are, but I'm not going to waste time showing you the colors. If you want to see the colors, buy the album. That's right. A fantastic live performance. New Order. And New Order in at number 5 in my top 30 artists of all time. In at number 4 is a band that I've talked about many, many, many times. Now we're getting into like 4 heavy hitters here. Like I said, New Order, I have 25 albums by them. And coming in at number 4 is Santana. I've talked about them before. Everybody knows Santana is one of my all-time favorite bands. Who's ever watched my channel. Santana being who I stylize my guitar playing after more than anybody, and who definitely taught me how to play guitar. Santana was my biggest guitar influence. And I'm showing one of my favorite albums by Santana. I have 47 pieces in my collection from Santana, and this is the Santana Lotus. This was only originally released in Japan. This is an original Japanese first press on quadraphonic vinyl, quadraphonic virgin vinyl. This is my original. I bought this back when it came out in the 70s. I saved up my pennies, and back in the day, I think this cost me $35 back in the day to buy this album, which was a lot of money in the 70s. But very few of them ever appeared in Canada. It was an import, and I jumped on it, and I've kept it as best condition as I can. It is a 3 LP set. I can't even begin to show you the inner art, because there are pages and pages of absolutely spectacular art. There's lyric sheets. There's all sorts of inner liners fold out. This thing folds out gigantic. Maybe one day I'll just do a video on the spectacular. This is probably the one album in my collection that has the best artwork of anything I own. But this is Santana Lotus, a spectacular performance by Santana in his heyday in the early 70s, and one of my favorite albums of all time by Santana. And Santana in at number 4 in my top 30 artists of all time, bands of all time. And now we're here, the top 3. Here we go, top 3. I think they're going to be no surprise to anybody. These are the top 30 bands for me of all time. Number 3 on my top 30 is a band that I have 39 pieces from in my collection, and I'm talking about Thin Lizzy. Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy, and this is, I haven't even cracked this open yet. I just found this a few weeks ago. I've never seen this before. When I saw it in the store, I had to jump on it. I think it's a soundboard recording. It's live in Tokyo 1980. I've never seen this anywhere before, and when I saw it at Arch Talk Cafe, I had to grab it. Thin Lizzy live in Tokyo 1980, the full Japanese broadcast. This was broadcast on Japanese radio or television or something, so it's probably got great quality, because Japanese broadcasts and so on always had great quality. And this goes from around the Chinatown era of albums, and I haven't even had a chance to crack this yet. I'm looking forward to spinning this. But Thin Lizzy in at number 3 in my favorite 30 artists of all time. And now we're down to number 2 and number 1. And honestly, a lot of times I say the artist that's number 1 is my favorite. But as I've said in previous videos and live streams, one day I might wake up and say this artist is number 1. The other day, another artist number 1. Excuse my dog who's digging in the corner. Miley, what you doing? Shh, 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 shh. My dog's having a little dig in the corner. She might start again. But these 2 artists, it's really hard to say which one's number 1. They're so close. But for the sake of this video, I will keep it as people always know me doing. So at number 2, though technically tied for number 1, is of course Alice Cooper, who I saw a few weeks ago. I just did a big Alice Cooper documentary where I talked about all of Alice Cooper's albums. So to come up with something to show you for this video that I didn't show on my Alice Cooper video, I came up with a couple of tribute albums to Alice Cooper. That's right. These are 2 fantastic tribute albums to Alice Cooper. This one's on a red vinyl. This is on a gold colored vinyl. This is a 2 LP set. The other one's a single LP set. This one's called Welcome to the Nightmare, a tribute to Alice Cooper. And this is killer. This is some of the best tribute. This is probably one of the best tribute records I've ever heard, featuring people like Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, Roger Daltrey, Ronnie James Dio, Slash, Dave Mustaine, Steve Jones. It is a really great tribute album to Alice Cooper. I highly recommend it. And then this one here, which came out last year, which is called The Many Faces of Alice Cooper. It is a 2 LP set going through, and it's a tribute as well as songs by members of Alice Cooper's band doing their own stuff. But Alice Cooper actually does appear on this tribute album in a song called As Rock Rolls On with Michael Bruce. And the reason why, and you're saying, well, Alice Cooper's a solo artist. No, because the first 7 albums by Alice Cooper were with the Alice Cooper Band, which featured, of course, Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, Neil Smith, Glenn Buxton, Alice Cooper. And even though that band broke up and they were called the Alice Cooper Band, they were a band. Alice was just the leader of the band, Alice Cooper. Alice then went on solo, but he's put together a number of bands over the year. And those original members from the first 7 albums have continued to appear on Alice's albums over the year, not doing full albums with them, other than a live album when he reunited with his original band and did a performance, which was released in 2015, and that's available on vinyl, live from the AstroTurf, which he plays with his original Alice Cooper Band. But those members of the Alice Cooper Band have gotten together, and as a band, they have done the odd song here and there on later Alice Cooper albums, such as Welcome to My Nightmare, the second Welcome to My Nightmare album. The band got together and they did 2 songs on that album. Paranormal, the band got together and did a couple songs on that album. And even Detroit Stories, his last album, the full band got back together and did a couple songs on that album. So to me, Alice Cooper are a band, and not only just a solo artist, but a band. So on this tribute album, you do have various members of the Alice Cooper band and things they did, like Rock and Roll Radio, performed by Neil Smith and Dennis Dunaway. Under My Wheels, performed by Dennis Dunaway and Neil Smith and Albert Bouchard from Blue Oyster Cult. How Do You Bleed, from Neil Smith's band, all sorts of things. King of America by Neil Smith. But then, of course, there's some great tributes on here with School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, done by another band. Hello Hooray! There's even an Alice Cooper tribute band, Does Only You Women Bleed. So it's a real hodgepodge of stuff, but it's really good spin. Highly recommended if you're an Alice Cooper completist. So Alice Cooper in at number 2, but actually technically tied for number 1. And of course, last but not least, my number 1 band of all time, and people know this from my channel, is of course Golden Earring. But they are, like I said, tied on any given day, tied with Alice Cooper for number 1. But yeah, number 1, Golden Earring. And of course, Alice Cooper. I mentioned Thin Lizzy. I have 39 pieces from in my Thin Lizzy collection. Alice Cooper, I have 65 pieces from in my Alice Cooper collection. 65 pieces from Alice Cooper. And Golden Earring, I have 58 pieces from Golden Earring in my Golden Earring collection. And the one I'm showing you today is one I haven't even had a chance to spin yet. It's the brand new remaster of Golden Earring's Moontan. And this just came out from Music on Vinyl, limited to a total, I think it is 5,000 individually numbered copies. It comes with a book, and it's a 2 LP set. The first LP is a complete remaster of the original Moontan album, and the second album is all the other things that were recorded during that Moontan session. This came out in CD last summer. It came out in CD and has now come out on vinyl. It's a 2 LP set. And what's special about this is the first time this album's been remastered from the original analog tapes. They found last year, the original first analog tapes from the recording sessions for Moontan in a vault. And they pulled them out, and the analog tapes included not only the album, but everything else they recorded that wasn't used on the album, and demos and everything. So it was all remastered, and it includes things like the song, like the North American version, of course, Moontan, with a different cover and different track listing. It's got all those original songs on it as well on the second disc, as well as songs that were recorded and dropped on singles. During the Moontan sessions. Everything from the Moontan sessions is recorded on the 2 LPs that's in this deluxe set. I'm so looking forward to spinning it, and I'll probably spin it today while I'm putting all this stuff away. But there you go, Golden Earring's Moontan, their classic album, all remastered analog for the first time since its release. And that's it, that's all. There you go, Golden Earring in at number 1, or tied for number 1 in my top 30 bands of all time. I hope you enjoyed it. It's another video I've been wanting to do for a long time, and if you did like it, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thumbs up always make people feel good, and if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe and turn that notification bell on, ding ding ding, so you don't miss any of my videos. I try to drop a video like this at least once a week. And comments welcome down below. I always reply to every comment I get. Sometimes it takes me a little time, but I always reply. And last but not least, if you're not following me on my Instagram, follow my Instagram, which is at AGK_Lifetime of Vinyl, where I try to post my spin of the day every day, among other things. That's it. That's all. Those are my top 30 bands of all time. I hope you enjoyed this video and this ranking. And if you noticed, I'm sure I'm going to be getting in the comments, Anthony, why aren't the Beatles in there? Why aren't Led Zeppelin in there? Because they're just not in my top bands of all time. So I'll see you guys soon in my next video. And as I always say, rock and roll!